What dark secret are you hiding from everyone? I witnessed my fiance's suicide last year. I moved states afterwards and started a new life. My co-workers, clients, and new friends call me the sunshine of whatever room I walk into. But I'm completely dead inside. Even though I choose to fake it, I resent them for not seeing how ed up I am. I have a secret fantasy life, populated with imaginary friends. It started in grade school, and I have continued all my life. I am in my 50s now, and still prefer to be alone in my imaginary world instead of being with family or friends. I can't even tell my psychiatrist because I am afraid he will lock me up or give me drugs to make it all stop. Last Christmas I leaned my sister and I don't have the same father and are technically half-sisters. My sister's biological father tried to start a relationship with my mom that resulted in a pregnancy, and ultimately didn't work out. That biological father is dead now, but I didn't probe any further about his identity or how he died in case it was something traumatic for my mom to remember. So she raised my sister as a single mother at my grandma's house in the 80s. Then she met my father and they started dating, and it worked out because they got married in the 90s, moved into a new house, and a short time after that I was born. She told me never call my sister my half-sister, and just pretend all of this doesn't matter because she's my sister, and I'm keeping it that way. And if anyone asks about the 10-year age gap, I just tell them, it's a long story. I make up lies about what I do on the weekend. Usually I don't do much, and I'm very content with that. Others are always asking me what I'm doing, and I never had anything to tell them. I make up lies to get out of phone calls or plans, saying I'm out of town or with friends. I love just being left alone. When I was 16, I conspired with a heroin addict I met online to help me off myself with heroin and dump my body in a dumpster in exchange for my valuables. I lived in a small town, and he was in a bigger city where my school had an upcoming trip. We planned for me to slip away during the trip and meet up with him to do the deed. He chickened out last minute and ghosted me. A man broke into my home about 10 years ago. Well, kind of. He knocked, I answered the door, and he pushed his way in. He spoke about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse and tried to extort me for protection, or he and his brothers of doom would come and kill me. He was huge, ex-Navy if he was to be believed. Drunk as hell, hand covered in blood holding a broken bottle. I was terrified. I told him to leave. He wouldn't. He was getting aggressive. I told him I would splatter his brains against the wall if he didn't. I didn't have a gun at the time. Anyway, he didn't leave. I went into my kitchen and grabbed a knife and sliced at him a few times. He staggered away, seemingly okay. I assumed he was all right, just wounded a bit. I never saw him again. A neighbor told me days later a man was found dead, some wounds on his arms. I can only guess he bled out. But I never got questioned somehow. There was a lot of blood in and around my house. I lived in a pretty seedy area, so I guess the cops just didn't care. The guy was apparently a repeat criminal. I killed a man, at least indirectly, and have never told anybody. When I was young, probably around age 9 or 10, I was walking home with my dog from a house around the block when he cut the corner and walked diagonally through the yard of this super mean old lady who lived at the end of your street. She was in her yard at the time tending to these really fancy-looking rose bushes she had growing in beds along the border with her neighbor. My dog was a very friendly golden retriever who didn't even really come near her, and certainly didn't do anything threatening, but she sprayed the f*** out of him with some kind of insecticide or other chemical she was using on her roses. I ran back home with the dog and hosed him off. He coughed a bunch, but seemed otherwise fine. I didn't tell my parents because somehow I thought I was going to get into trouble for letting the dog walk in her yard. I'm glad I didn't tell them, though, because I decided that night to sneak downstairs, out the half-bath window, and down the street to her yard where I cut down every goddamn rose bush I could get my hands on. I have never been happy, truly, and 99% of times, I just adjust with people forcibly and make them happy mostly without thinking mine. When I was a teenager, I worked at a novelty tourist shop near me. Being the idiot that I was, I stole a wad of cash from the store. It was $100 I told nobody, but they knew it was missing. Right about the same time, a coworker who was always trying to get me fired was telling someone she got about $100 in tips from her other job. They ended up firing her because they didn't trust that it wasn't her. I've struggled with disordered eating for at least a decade. It ebbs and flows. I know it's unhealthy, but the toxic part of me loves the feeling of being empty. Several years ago, it was really bad. I was at my lowest weight ever. I had brain fog, difficulty breathing. When I started eating again, my stomach would get really bloated, even if I only ate a small amount. I gained weight in the last year or so, and my depression and anxiety got really bad for a while. My family thinks I don't want to spend time with them. However, I just wanted to stay home because trying on my clothes and the idea of being in public made me want to kill myself. It was easier on me mentally to just stay home. In high school, I was a super good kid. Straight A student who loved homework, keeping out of trouble, and who was quiet as hell during class. So anyway, there was this guy who was also in AP classes with me, but he was super loud and obnoxious, but would pull stunts in such a way that he would have some margin of plausible deniability. Though we never spoke, I'm not sure he even knew I existed. He rubbed me the wrong way. Maybe it was from the one cold day when this other girl in our class had her nipples poking through her shirt, BC, she forgot a sweater, and he kept saying to her, "Damn, it's cold, huh?" Maybe it was from when he would pretend to be friends with kid who was definitely spectrum and desperate to be friends with him to do the bully's homework for him, and then bully him the next day. IDK. So at random, sometimes once a week or a month or once every couple of months, I would whistle. It's this high-pitched whistle that sounds like a tea kettle that I can do while barely moving my mouth. Back then, no one knew I could do it except for my family. My grandpa was stationed in Okinawa, Japan during the Korean War, while in the Marines. He hooked up with a woman there, and she got pregnant. So I have a Japanese aunt and a few cousins, in Japan, whom I've never met before. The only person in my life who knows this story is my husband. When I was 8, I was desperate to be liked by the older boys on the street. I was the youngest boy, other than a baby or two, on the block, so I rarely had any boys to play with. When I was noticed by an older boy, 19, a senior in high school, I was thrilled. He, I'll call him Mike, saw me riding my bike up and down the street one day while he was outside playing basketball with a friend of his, who I will call Sean. Together, they stopped me and talked to me about school, about my bike, and other random shit. Then, Mike invited me inside for a Coke. Since my parents didn't keep soda in the house often, this was a treat. Once inside, my can of Coke in my hand, Mike and Sean started turning the conversation to things I didn't understand. I don't remember exactly what they talked about, but I do remember a lot of questions about my body, my penis, whether I got erections, and if I had ever seen an older boy's dick. This turned into them taking their pants off and urging me to do the same. I didn't want to, but Mike knew I was an insecure little kid. He turned on the manipulation. "Oh, well, I thought you were cool, Faustus. I guess not. I don't talk to boys who aren't cool." That kind of shit. I did what they asked from that point on, afraid to be uncool and not have older boys to talk to anymore. That day, all they made me do was touch them. But for months afterward, until Mike went away to college, I was used by them. Most often it was just Mike. About half the time, though, Sean was involved. He seemed less gung-ho about raping me than Mike did. Without going into details, if you can imagine something sexual a 19-year-old could do to an 8-year-old, he did it to me. The weirdest part about it all was, though I hated it when it was happening, I missed it when it was over. I felt special when Mike would invite me into his house. When he left for college, and when Sean completely ignored me after Mike was gone, I felt lonely and unwanted again. I never told my parents. To this day, more than 30 years after the fact, they don't know that it happened. Mike and Sean never faced any sort of repercussions for what they did to me, though in a small bit of justice, Mike did end up going to prison about 10 years ago for doing the same thing to another boy. There are probably more than just that boy and me, but at least he finally got caught for hurting someone. I don't know why, but I always keep thinking that one day I will cut all contact with everyone in my life, disappear from their lives, and just keep for myself. I don't know why I think like this. I have some good friends, that I didn't graduate from college. I failed one course my senior year, second semester. The ceremony was already set up, so they let everyone walk. I had no diploma in my award. Nobody knows to this day, and it's been 17 years. Failed one course, 3 credits. Was ashamed, so I never went back for those 3 credits. So everyone believes I graduated. I used to cam on chat sites when I was underage. I also posted nude stuff to Tumblr when that was big, also underage. I never comprehended that I was posting CP of myself and feeding the sick predators on the internet. I was smart enough not to use my face for most of it. I'm sure my face is out there, though. Somewhere. I cringe thinking about it. I've told one therapist but stopped seeing her before we could dive into it. I walked in on my brother being investigated for possession of child pornography when I was 19, which severely traumatized me. He's now a registered sex offender. That was the darkest period of my life. I'm focusing on my mental health now, though. Pest control technician here. You're paying too much for pest control. Whoever you hired, unless it's a fairly small company, they are ripping you off. Unless you have cockroaches or bedbugs, YouTube it. Times are hard enough right now. Funny, lighthearted story from my childhood. My little brother was in the shower. I could hear him singing. I put a coat on backwards, and a stocking cap pulled over my face, and waited outside the bathroom door. He opened the door, still singing and dancing kinda, and I did the Frankenstein thing. Arms out, moaning, He screamed and fell backwards, knocking the toilet completely over. Water went everywhere. The top of the toilet tank broke, shower curtain ripped down, and him laying on the floor in the middle of all this. I ran back down the hall, coat and hat off, and sauntered back casually. By then, my mother and father and our sisters were there, and everyone is like, you know, what the hell? I've heard him tell this story as proof of the existence of ghosts. To this day, little feller is now a 52-year-old bank manager with 2 kids. He believes in ghosts. I don't feel a bit bad.